Hello, and you're watching TV9 News, and I'm your host Deepak. Well, today we will be speaking about llamas. Well, not exactly llamas, but something that llamas produce. So, in a recent study, researchers at the US National Institute of Health are looking at neutralizing nanobodies that bind to SARS-CoV-2 spike receptor binding domain and block the spike protein's interaction through the receptor binding domain with ACE2 receptors in the human cells. And we know that this is how the virus gains access into the human cell, and this is a pretty interesting study, and I feel it's actually worthwhile speaking about. And for this, let's talk about camelids. Well, camelids includes animals like camels, llamas, and also alpacas. And these creatures have a very interesting antibody setups. So in order to explain to you how their antibodies are, let me show you two pictures. Well, this is how humans have antibodies that have heavy chains as well as light chains on either sides. It kind of looks like this, where you have the heavy chain segments, which are these here and here, and whereas they have also light chain segments on either sides. Whereas this particular area on top is where it detects and also binds itself to antigens, which in the present scenario is COVID-19. Whereas in camelids, this is how the nano bodies look like. They just have two heavy segments on either sides, and on top this is exactly where, like in human antibodies, this is exactly where they detect the antigens like COVID-19. So the scientists at the National Institute of Health in the US have isolated these tiny sets of antibodies, hoping that these small antibodies at the end of these nanobodies could probably used to help prevent infections and also detect virus particles by grabbing hold of the SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins. But then you might question as to what happens after it latches onto the spike protein of coronavirus. Well, to answer this, we have with us Dr. Sitesh Roy joining us from Mumbai. So doctor, could you please tell us what happens to the virus after these nanobodies latch on to the spike proteins?
After the nanobodies have attached to the spike protein, it is no longer able to connect with the ACE2 receptor, which is so important for its entry into the human cell. And hence the virus, which may have been released from another human cell in the body or may have been entering the system for the first time, is then removed by what is called the innate immune system, which includes things like the macrophages, Langerhans cells, dendritic cells, as well as the white blood cells that are able to detect self from non-self and very quickly see the white blood cell, recognize these viruses as an invader, and remove them from the circulation or from the tissue of the body.
So doctor, what is the application of this particular research?
So Deepak, this research can actually give us a new tool for first treatment of SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19, whereby people who have just been exposed to the virus and maybe from high-risk categories and can worsen with the disease as it progresses can be given this nanobodies either through a nebulizer or through an inhaler and maybe through an injection or an infusion. And by that they can latch on and remove the virus from the circulation and prevent the disease progression. And the second thing that can happen is they can actually prophylactically use it for healthcare workers and other people who are at risk of the infection. So this is a very invaluable treatment, but still a long way to go.
Well, that was Dr. Sitesh giving us his insights. Now you might wonder how scientists came out with this particular research. So to do this, the researchers immunized a llama called Cormac 5 times over 28 days with a purified version of SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And after testing hundreds of antibodies or nanobodies in these llamas, scientists have identified 13 nanobodies produced by camelids as strong candidates. Well, nanobodies are nothing but the tiny antibodies found in llamas, which are 1/10 of the size of the human antibodies. Now, these studies showed that this particular nanobody bound to the ACE2 receptor 2 to 10 times stronger than nanobodies produced by other labs. Along with that, the test tube experiment also showed that these nanobodies also directly got stuck to the ACE2 binding portion of the spike protein. So basically, these nanobodies act as a chewing gum on a key, which is SARS-CoV-2, and to unlock the ACE2 receptors, we need to insert the key. But In this case, where the research has found that if you have these nanobodies like chewing gums, if you stick the chewing gum to the key, then obviously you cannot open the lock. So that is exactly what the researchers are trying to state in this particular study. But to check whether this concept works, the scientists genetically mutated a harmless pseudovirus so that it could use the spike protein in COVID-19 to infect cells that have ACE2 receptors. And they found that low levels of these nanobodies prevented the pseudovirus from infecting these cells. The researchers showed that the nanobody was equally effective in preventing the infections in petri dishes when it was sprayed through the kind of nebulizer or inhaler often used to help treat patients with asthma. So this new research could even be helpful in preventing the virus infection load in a particular person, because these nanobodies latch on to the spike protein of COVID-19 in a person's body who is infected by coronavirus. But not all the nanobodies could latch on to the entire virus load in a particular person, whereas they'll only latch on to a few virus particles and reduce the virus load in a particular person, thereby not worsening the situation for that particular individual who has tested positive for COVID-19. So if this research proves to be materialized in real life, then we could probably be looking at sprays like how people use for asthmas, which they can spray into their mouth and could reduce the virus load in their body by the help of these tiny nanobodies which are found in llamas. So if you guys have liked this piece of information that I've shared with you all today, please do drop in your comments, and also do not forget to like, share and subscribe to TV9 Digital on various social media platforms. Many thanks for watching.